At 51,000 miles driven on my Model Y and having full self-driving beta for over a year and a half now, I think it's time to do a quick review of the state of the art of full self-driving. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. First of all, so good to be back home again. It has been a rough couple of weeks, and a huge thank you to everyone for their kind thoughts and prayers and everything like that for my mother. She is recovering well. There is going to be more after this, and I'm going to have to go back later this summer, but at least for a little while, I'm home again. Second of all, definitely check this out. The best paint is no paint, Cybertruck. You can get this and a bunch of other new designs on my merch store, so definitely check out the link in the description for that and get some merch and get some cool stuff. And of course, there's a lot more than just t-shirts. There's mugs, tumblers, bumper stickers, and on, so definitely check that out. All right, so on to Tesla's full self-driving beta and the state of the art right now. I have to preface this, of course, by stating that I am outside of the inner circle. I don't know anything about the code that's going on right now. The last public update that we got that went into any real depth was last September for AI Day 2022. I was privileged to be there. Hopefully there will be another one in September-ish of this year, and I will be able to go to that as well. It was absolutely fascinating, not just to listen to the main presentations, but to talk to all the engineers around the main hall and get a real feel for what's going on. But anyway, so it's been a while. What is that? 8 or 9 months since we've actually had an in-depth update on full self-driving. So clearly, I don't know what's actually going on under the hood, and honestly, if I did, I probably couldn't even tell you that because I'd be working for Tesla. So what I'm going to give you is sort of a beta tester / quality assurance type person's point of view. And I have done this a lot for just traditional software types of projects, including things like I was just listening to Chris Lettner talking to Lex Friedman on Lex Friedman's podcast. An amazing conversation, really gets into the depths of Mojo and Python and building compilers and everything. I highly recommend it. It's a very, very long and very, very technical. So I had to listen, even I had to listen to it in small chunks of like a half hour at a time. But it's a really fascinating thing. But he helped develop Swift. In fact, I think he was one of the people who actually began Swift in, I think it was 2010 when he started it at Apple. But anyway, I was like, as soon as I saw Swift come out, I had learned, procedural languages as a young person, and I'd learned some objective languages like Objective-C. I'd always avoided C++ because I found it kind of a gross language. I did not like the aesthetics of it. And I had looked at Python before, but of course, Python was very, very slow at the time. So anyway, when Swift came out, and I think that was 2014 or 2013, I think it was 2014. But when that came out, I jumped immediately onto Swift. And that was a little bit of a rough transition because even as Chris says, there were some, the 1.0 version of Swift was not quite production ready. So there were a lot of issues with it, and it was an interesting experience. So I got very much the experience of beta testing this. I've beta tested Autodesk's Maya from way back in the mid 1990s. So I've beta tested games. I've done lots of stuff. And of course, as a teacher, I'm constantly QA testing, beta testing student software as well. So it's a really interesting experience doing this, and I feel like I have a general sense of how things operate under the hood from looking at it from the outside. So I just wanted to give that as the perspective from which I'm coming so that you don't think that I'm just doing this from out of nowhere. And of course, in the last 10 or 11 days, I've driven, I think, about 2,000 miles or so, almost all of that on full self-driving beta, and almost all of that in areas that I'm not very familiar with. So I really have depended on full self-driving beta to get me around and to drive where I need to go. So where are we versus October of 2021 when I actually got full self-driving beta the first time? It's actually a little bit difficult to remember that far back because things have changed so radically, but it was a difficult program to use. It was very generously called beta at that point. It was more like an advanced alpha version of things. So it worked, but it had a lot of problems and it required a lot of attention on the driver's part. It did not even come close to passing the spouse test. My wife would not get in the car with me if I was driving on full self-driving beta. So it was me and me alone, and I would drive around and I would do the tests and things like that. And when she would get in the car with me, she's like, turn that thing off. Don't even use it or anything like that. Where we are right now, the car drives so well. It is 99.5% of the time I drive, it's doing really, really well. And at this point, it has not only passed the spouse test, but my wife will not take our other car because we of course have a Model 3 as well, but that doesn't have full self-driving beta. And if we're going to go on any kind of road trip, she refuses to drive that car because she's like, I want to use full self-driving beta. So it not only passes the spouse test in the sense of her being willing to be in the car while I'm using it, but she uses it all the time. And she says very clearly that she misses it driving the other car. So from a big picture point of view, full self-driving 11.4.x is just a massive improvement over the original version 10 that I got a year and a half ago or so. So lest you think I'm going to fanboy the heck out of this video, and I'm not, I'm going to go through a bunch of the issues that I and several other people that I've talked to still see with the software. The number one is phantom braking or phantom random speed limit adjustments. Even on the interstate, suddenly the car would decide that the maximum speed was like 50 miles an hour or something like that. And it's like a 65 or 70 and you're like, whoa, why did it slow down like that? And I don't know why. I don't know if it thinks it sees a sign someplace or something like that, but you have to scroll the speed limit back up again because of course that's quite dangerous driving that slow on an interstate freeway. There is also of course phantom braking. That happens much, much, much less than it used to, but it still happens. And most of the time it's a relatively light phantom braking now. So what it'll do is kind of like, as if you were taking your foot off the gas pedal or accelerator pedal. It will slow down somewhat, but it's not violent. But every once in a while, it will brake pretty hard. And of course, that can be dangerous if somebody's following really, really close behind you. So generally speaking, if I'm going to hover my foot over one of the pedals, I usually hover my foot over the accelerator pedal because it's much more likely to phantom brake than it is to not stop for things. I haven't had an experience in a very long time. Now, sometimes it slows down a little bit later than I wish it would. So, you'll be coming up on cars stopped at a red light and you're like, oh gosh, it's still going pretty fast. But I think that's just my own personality. And maybe I actually start to slow down too early because it does it very safely. I don't feel worried at all. And in fact, it's one of those things that I very much trust it to follow traffic and to not hit anything. Very good with red lights, etc. It's really good about that as well, but it does have the tendency to phantom brake. And one of the worst offenders is if you're driving down, especially a 2-lane road or something, and there's a stop sign for the road that's, there's a road that crosses like this, like a T-junction, but especially if it's not quite 90 degrees, if it's angled somewhat, and the stop sign is slightly facing your direction, the car usually gets right up to it and then maybe 50 feet before that stop sign, then it slams the brakes on. And it can do it a little bit or it can do it a lot. And it's weird because it doesn't happen. If it was actually going to try to stop, if it thought it was a real stop sign for this direction of road, it would start stopping a long time ago. So what it is it's like all of a sudden it goes like, oh crap, there's a stop sign. You kind of get that sense that that's what's happening with the full self-driving neural network stack is it's going, oh crap, right at the last second and it's trying to stop, but it's too late for it to stop. And then it keeps on going. So when I get to those situations where I can see a stop sign angled, I definitely keep my foot over the accelerator pedal because a lot of the time it's not nearly as bad as it used to be, but I would say still about 50% of the time with a stop sign that's angled somewhat towards the road you're driving on, it will hit the brakes a little bit at least. So that's still a definite issue. Speed limits are a really big issue, especially for me driving around my local area, which is that it just, for whatever reason, sometimes it doesn't see the speed limit sign, especially if it's a weird one, like a 20-mile-an-hour sign versus a 25, 35, 45, those kinds of things. It also doesn't see electronic signs a lot of times. So a lot of times on highways, they'll have it in, big bright lights or something. Instead of a permanent fixed sign, it'll say 65, but then if it's heavy traffic, it'll turn it down to 55, those kinds of things. It doesn't tend to see those very well. It tends to think of those as something like a traffic light. And it just generally does not use Google Maps. It has access to Google Maps. It says right down in the corner, Google Maps is what provides the data. So it clearly would have access to what Google Maps thinks are the speed limits for all the roads. I really wish the Tesla full self-driving team would default to using the speed limits that Google Maps gives it. I know where they're coming from. I know that they want to be independent of those maps, but at this point, they have that data, and if they need to shift it over to an eventual Tesla maps that they do themselves, they'll have that data. They have that information themselves at this point of what the posted speed limits are for all of these roads. So it would be really, really nice if it would default to the speed limit that Google Maps and eventually Tesla Maps has for these roads, and only change that if it actually sees a speed limit sign that varies from what it thinks it should be. And then one weird thing that's cropped up with just the latest version, and I don't have full self-driving 11.4.4 4 at this point or 3. I can't remember what the latest one is, but whatever the latest one that Chuck Cook and those guys have got, I haven't quite gotten that one yet. But the version that I have, the 11.4.2, it has a weird thing where it wants to go into turn lanes a lot of times. Now, this didn't used to happen. It used to just stay straight, but now there'll be a straight road and there'll be a turn, something to turn off onto another road, like a little access road. And it loves to try to get over then, and then has to pull back into the main road. So that's an annoying thing too. That seems to be just a bug with the current version. So hopefully that's fixed with the latest that just came out and that doesn't happen anymore. So those are the biggest issues that I see with full self-driving beta right now. You'll notice most of them have to do with braking and speed limits. That's generally what it is. There is that weird lane thing that it does sometimes, and I'm just assuming that that's something that's going to be transient and it's going to be gone away from, because a lot of people have complained about that. So I'm assuming that's going to go away in the next version or very, very soon. But the sort of persistent issue that's come up over time is speed limits and the wrong speed limits, and of course, phantom braking issues. Phantom braking issues have definitely statistically gotten significantly better since the earlier versions that I've driven. So that was the kind of thing that it was a pretty significant problem and actually kind of dangerous, because it would brake so hard out on an open road that if somebody was following behind you, it could be an issue. But now if it does the phantom braking, it tends to generally be relatively light braking. It's like it's tapping on it, or again, like it's taking its foot off the accelerator pedal or something. So a little bit annoying, but definitely not dangerous anymore under most circumstances. And then of course, the other persistent issue, which just doesn't ever seem to get better, is the speed limit issue and just it not understanding what speed limits are for various roads. But what I want to say here is these are not generally safety critical issues. These are now annoyance issues. They're things where you have to scroll the speed limit up and down and maybe touch the accelerator to give it a little bit of confidence to go through situations where it wants to brake a little bit or something like that. But these are not safety critical issues. There used to be a lot of safety critical interventions. I have a left turn that's a very weird one that I tend to drive a lot in town, and it goes across a 4-lane road. So there's a 2 lanes and then a median and then another 2 lanes. It's got a light, and it's also protected, but it doesn't realize that because it doesn't have an arrow, but there's no traffic coming from the other direction. And the car used to just freak out. There's all these like safety poles and things like that in the middle of the median, and it would try to turn into those. It would try to turn into the other lane. And now it handles that situation perfectly, never even a problem. So, situations that used to present safety critical issues where I was like, oh crap, this car is going to have problems and I need to take over now, or else it's going to crash into something or cause an accident. Those situations really don't occur anymore. So this is the kind of massive change that has happened. And I have to go back and dial back my memory because, of course, you get spoiled with the state of the art. You're like, oh yeah, that's the way it's always worked. And you're like, no, that's not the way it's always worked. It has gotten a lot better. And of course, the other really huge recent change is with 11, there is the highway stack now utilizes the modern neural network architecture that's using 360 surround video and much more advanced neural networks using transformers and things instead of RNNs and all of that kind of stuff. So there's huge advances in terms of the highway driving. And of course, Elon Musk has recently posted about the fact that windshield wipers also use neural networks, which was very interesting to find out, and that's going to get very much better. And we're going to see parking lot behavior get better. I've also seen parking lot behavior go from non-usable, like it basically, once you pulled off the road, you had to drive it in the parking lot, to now it will drive in a parking lot effectively. Now it won't go find itself a parking place, but it will pull you up to the front door if that's what you want to do. So generally speaking, of course, once I get into the parking lot and close to the store that I'm going to, I will then take over and park. So it's not doing all of that stuff yet. Still doesn't do reverse as far as I know. And it doesn't do U-turns particularly well. It will do them kind of, but not really. So, there's still places that it needs to be advanced, but the difference between where I started in October of 2021 and now is just massive. And a lot of that time was spent doing, I think, foundational work. And again, to use James Dauma's analogy, he talked about building the foundation of a skyscraper and how people dig a hole in the ground and then they work and they work and they work down at the bottom. And it doesn't look like anything's happening as you drive by the building. You just see all of those fences up and it's like so-and-so construction or something. You're like, wow, it's been like 8 or 9 months months and nothing has happened. But a lot of stuff is going on because the foundation is being changed. But then when the skyscraper, when the frame actually goes up, it seems almost like magic how fast the thing goes up. And that's because all of this foundation work was going on under the hood and you weren't seeing it. And now Elon's talked about this. He said 11 dot whatever is making gigantic changes. The pace of advancement is actually accelerating instead of decelerating. So we're not hitting in that logistic curve that goes like this. We're not hitting the flattening part. We're staying on the linear part. And that is a huge, huge thing. And maybe even tipping upward a little bit more. So if this holds true, this is actually massive news. If it's actually continuing to go up in a linear fashion or possibly even tipping up a little bit as opposed to leveling off, this is what happened with full self-driving beta over and over and over again. You heard Andre Karpathy talk about it. Elon Musk has talked about it. They would get to a local maximum with whatever given technology they had, and they would have to go back and re-architect it. But it seems like what they've got this time is good enough that before we get to the flattening off part of this curve, it's going to be significantly better than the average human driver. And speaking of that, let's think about what full self-driving can do right now. And this, again, you have to remember that look at the landscape. You've got Cruise, you've got Waymo, you've got Mobileye, which is doing some things. They're all incredibly limited. They all require a massive amount of hardware in order to work. Tesla is using currently 8 cameras and nothing else. No radar, no ultrasonic sensors, nothing like that. This is pretty amazing stuff that they're doing this all with cameras. But yesterday, just yesterday, we left town. We had to drive through Washington, D.C. traffic, which is gross. We then took a back route. We decided to go through the Appalachians instead of going down 95 to 85. So we went 66 to, I think it's 29. It's not even an interstate, but it's just this state route at 29 through Virginia. Anyway, totally beautiful. But when we got there, number one, sometimes the traffic was very light. Other times it was very heavy. A lot of towns, a lot of traffic lights, really, really windy roads with no visibility, right? You come over a hill and make a turn immediately, things like that. Beautiful views. It was absolutely gorgeous. Car handled it great. It went through cloudy conditions. It went through sunny conditions. Then we finally got to I-85. We connected back up around Charlotte, North Carolina, and then a giant rainstorm hit, and it was in the middle of a huge rainstorm, and it did say degraded, and it actually did reduce the speed. So we were on a 70-mile-an-hour stretch of road, and at first it reduced the speed from 80 to 75, and then it reduced it from 75 to 70, and it did have a line that said, you know, it might be degraded due to all these circumstances, but it drove it the whole time. It did not have a problem. It just knocked the speed down by 10 miles an hour from where we were going, and it went, and it was incredible. I mean, it was a very, very heavy rainstorm at times, and you couldn't really see all that far, and yet I was looking at the visualization, and it was seeing as well or better than I was through the rain. So this is all using cameras. So, you know, for people who are like, it has to have this, it has to have that, it really doesn't. It's driving as well or better than I am in circumstances that are very difficult. Then after the rainstorm, of course, clouds go away and we're driving westward. So the sun sets. So it's got, you know, sun coming straight in the camera. Then we stopped to eat for a while, and then it was pitch black, and we're driving down back roads to get to Athens because there's no interstate access to Athens. Pitch black roads, driving through there, no traffic around it, does well with that. Then it gets to the city where we are, takes the exit, goes to the thing, goes to the neighborhood. These are just incredible conditions that it's going through. It went through everything. And if you compare that to something like Cruise or Waymo, yeah, they are officially level 4 autonomous vehicles, but they're geofenced in tiny little areas. They can only operate at certain times of day. They can only operate under certain weather conditions. There are, you know, it's like, yeah, but, right? So people tout that these are better than Teslas, but the Tesla drove us 99.5%-ish of the entire journey. And I'm not just talking about yesterday. I'm talking about driving down to Charleston last week, messing around there, then having to go down to Savannah, then up to Washington, D.C., then back here, then driving around in Washington, D.C., going to the hospital over and over again, driving to pharmacies. I had no idea where they were. It's just incredible how well this software works right now. I'm not talking about the future. I'm not talking about in 6 months or something. I'm talking about today. It works amazingly. And especially in areas where I am unfamiliar with the traffic patterns and with where I need to be going, I think it's actually safer than I am because it knows. It's like, oh, I need to be in this lane and I'm going to exit here. And if you have driven around the Washington, D.C. area, it can be very hairy because it's a lot of traffic and there's weird intersections. There's, I think they call it the salad bowl, the 395, 495 interchange. And it's like you have to be in the second lane from the right and then the third lane from the left. And, you know, you have to be doing all this stuff. And as a human, I'm like, where the hell am I going? But the car is just like, and it does this. And in those circumstances, I actually think it's probably safer than I am. And I did post something about driving my mom's gas car to the hospital to pick her up, because when I went to pick her up, she wanted to get into her car because she felt comfortable doing that, which is totally cool. But the issue with that was that then I had to drive, and I just was like, oh gosh, I'm on my own. This is a terrifying feeling to actually be on my own and have to drive the car as opposed to having full self-driving. Fascinatingly enough, that tweet got a response from Elon Musk, which was awesome, and now has close to 3 million views, I think. And as soon as it got some traction, the trolls just came out and were telling me I was a horrible person. Obviously, I was terrible, that I couldn't drive anymore. I was stupid. You look at the comments. I won't even go into it. Some were pretty awful. And I was like, geez, I was going to pick up my mom. And I did say it was a bad experience driving a gas car, but I will stand by that. It was a bad experience after driving a Tesla. But anyway, that experience threw into very sharp relief the confidence that I have in full self-driving beta. So it's not just the fact that was driving a Tesla around, because it's great and you can accelerate into traffic if you need to and all of that kind of stuff. And it just feels better to drive the car, and it's not noisy, it doesn't pollute, all of that kind of stuff. But the full self-driving aspect of it, I'm so confident of it that when I'm in a vicinity where I don't really know the area that well, clearly around town, I know how to get around. And so there's times when I'm like, yeah, I can do this better than you can, full self-driving. But in areas that I'm not that familiar with, it's really, really helpful. And if people think like, oh, you're lame because you can't drive anymore, that's great. I have no desire. It's not like I want to drive. I have to drive, right? We all had to learn how to drive in order to exist in modern society and be able to travel places. That kind of thing is just a necessity. It's just table stakes to live in modern society. If we don't have to do it, why? It's like operating an elevator. It would be the same thing as going like, oh, I can't believe you can't operate an elevator manually anymore. And it's like, no, because there's a freaking button. I push the button now and it does, you know, the computer does it. So I don't understand why people are so up in arms about the fact that like suddenly I can't drive. Yes, of course I can still drive. But what I'm saying is that I feel safer with full self-driving today, like right now, June 12th of 2023, than I do without it. Much, much safer with it than without it. And in 5 years, hopefully it will have become so good that I won't have to drive anymore. And I'm not going to bemoan that. I'm not going to go like, it'd be like, you know, bemoaning again the fact that I can't operate an elevator, those old ones with the, you know, the big levers and all of that kind of stuff and the doors that you open yourself. It would be completely stupid because I don't care. I really don't care if I can drive or not. I would much rather have a car that's safer than me, drive me the places I need to go so I can do something more useful with my time than driving. Driving is a waste of time, and it's just, I'm sitting there. Yeah, I can think about things and I can listen to videos and stuff like that, but there's only so much that I can do in the driver's seat, and it will become a much better situation when I don't have to be in that. So while people are really getting up in arms about the fact that it's like, oh, you're going to lose your ability to drive and stuff, I'm like, good. The day that I don't have to drive again is going to be a good day. And by the way, a lot of gray hair here. I'm not getting younger anymore. Certainly my reaction time is going down. My eyesight is not as good as it used to be. My night vision is not as good as it used to be. So there would come a day eventually when I will get old enough that I would not be able to drive on my own safely anymore under certain circumstances. This is great. If the car can do it for me, I will be more mobile, more active later in my life than I would be able to be otherwise. So why are people upset about this? I don't know. If you want to drive a car, there will be race courses. There will be effectively a horse farm that you can go to and drive your car around and enjoy the experience of doing that. But you won't have to deal with it every day. And it will be safer too, because again, remember, these cars are not going to be as safe as humans. They're going to be 10x and 100x and then 1000x safer than a human being driving. So it would be stupid to let people drive on major thoroughfares. So what is the state of the art in full self-driving today? There are a lot of little niggling issues that are kind of like, you know, it's annoying, but there are really not very many safety critical issues that crop up anymore, which means that the car drives about as well as an average human driver under almost all circumstances right now. And we are only going to see an acceleration of this. If Elon is correct, and it's not just getting better at a linear pace, but actually getting better faster and starting to tip up, we are going to see full self-driving, autonomous driving from Tesla get substantially better than humans very, very rapidly. And that is all to the good as far as I'm concerned. If you want to keep driving your car and not let a full self-driving thing do it for you, that's fine. You know, for the foreseeable future, you will have that choice to do either one of those things. But especially if you're having to drive around in unfamiliar areas or drive for long periods of time, why would you put yourself through the suffering of having to do it yourself when the car can do it for you? So even today, there is a massive use case and a massive economic benefit and a massive personal stress benefit to you as a human being to utilize full self-driving beta, and that is only going to get more and more exaggerated over time. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking, and a lot of people are probably going to write me terrible comments in the comment section. Whatever, you don't have to agree with me on all of this kind of stuff, but I would like to know your thoughts, especially if you've been using full self-driving beta for a period of time, what you think about the advances and what you think about the problems that still exist for it. And while you're down there, please do like the video and also consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon patrons, my YouTube channel members, and of course my Twitter subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can, even if it's just watching. Thank you all so much. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a Tesla, a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.